Welcome to Petability. I'm your host, Cathy Simons, certified veterinary technician and certified canine rehabilitation practitioner.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston, licensed physical therapist and small animal physical rehabilitationist.
Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives.
Hello, Cathy. What's going on?
Good morning, Chris. I have some news to share with you today.
Ooh.
Do you remember when I talked to you about applying to the International Association for Animal Hospice and Palliative Care program? Do you remember that conversation?
I do, but you've got a lot of irons in the fire. So elaborate, please.
I applied to be in their program and they accepted me. So now I'm studying to become a certified hospice and palliative care technician. I'm really excited about it, and it's something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I just continue to feel that calling. And so I applied, and they took me in.
Well, and why wouldn't they?
They accepted me.
She acts so shocked, ladies and gentlemen.
Accepted me.
First of all, I need to interject here because my podcast partner Cathy and I have known each other for over 20 years. She's brilliant. I've learned so many things from her. And of course they accepted her. And this is your jam, Cathy. I mean, this end of life stuff and you say like the older and more differently abled, the better. This is a perfect fit for you.
Right. And think about all the things that I can offer with a combination of rehabilitation and palliative care and hospice. So many things from, teaching owners how to even modify their pet's environment, adding to or contributing to that pet's pain management program, maintaining mobility and independence. I'm just really excited about it. And I've always felt like, the end of your pet's life is just as important as the beginning. And these pets deserve the love and the care and the respect that they deserve to make a graceful exit. Mm-hmm. So I think it's that important. So here's to 12 to 15 months of classwork, case studies, paperwork, and exams.
Congratulations. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm set to graduate in August of 2024. So I'm sure we'll talk about this again. So thank you, Chris.
Awesome.
So now on to our show. I invited my friend Diane Dewberry from the Healthy Animal Healing Center to talk on our show about flower essences, or as I call them, Chris, the power of the flower.
Oh, nice.
And I think the audience may be familiar with one of the most recognized blends that's out there is Rescue Remedy. So our audience may be familiar with some types of flower essences. And actually learning from Diane about flower essence for me was also part of this journey to hospice and palliative care and sort of truly understanding how important our pet's emotional well-being is, the power of that mind-body connection, and the importance of that balance. And as you know, before I had Mac, I had another pug named Digger who was blind. And Digger had a condition called sudden acquired retinal degeneration syndrome. So he lost his vision very quickly over a period of just a few weeks. He was surrendered to a reputable foster-based organization. And shortly after that, he was adopted by us. And it was clear in the beginning that Digger was pretty emotionally shut down. And understandably, he had been through a lot in a very short time frame. And as we got to know him and he opened up, we could see that he had some significant emotional triggers. And one of them was crying children. Anytime he heard it on the television or outside, he would start barking and crying and growling, and he was really agitated and shaking, and it could wake him out of a dead sleep, and even to this day, if Tom and I hear a child crying on the television, we rush to turn the sound off, because it was that significant for him. And he also had a fear of men, not all men. He was doing great with my husband, but he had fear of, some men. And so I reached out to Diane, who made Digger a blended formula of essences. And I remember not long after that visiting her store, and Digger let some man pet him. And Diane and I were like, and it was just this huge breakthrough, right? He was calm. He let the gentleman pat him. He even solicited a little bit of attention from him, which was really exciting to see. I had this amazing picture of Digger where we took him to a pug meetup, and he sought out and wandered into the center of this group of children. And these kids were just so gentle with him and so respectful, but they were all petting him at the same time, and he was just sitting there letting them do it. And I was like, wow. I mean, that's powerful. It was as if these essences allowed him to release these traumas and open up to the guy, that he was. And he then became a dog that like loved new adventures and going places. And it was a life-altering event for him.
Yeah.
So
it truly sounds transformational.
It really was. And it happened much faster than I thought, too. It was within a short period of time of starting this. And then Tom and I were like, is this really happening? And it was really happening. But I digress. Let me tell you a little bit about Diane. I'm going to stop talking about me, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my friend Diane before we dive in. Diane opened the Healthy Animal Healing Center in Pembroke, Massachusetts in 2002 with the goal of improving the health and well-being of animals by integrating fresh food diets, supplements, energetic healing, and flower essences, providing a holistic approach to helping pet parents create a happy, healthy, balanced pet. Now, Diane has been studying the science and art of animal nutrition and animal intuitive healing for over 30 years. Her dedication to promoting the well-being of animals extends into educating the pet owner about the benefits of holistic care and empowering them to make informed decisions for their pets. And so through the Healthy Animal Healing Center, she's created a haven of compassion and healing, providing a beacon of hope for animals and their human guardians. And most importantly is that Diane, along with the staff at the Duxbury Animal Shelter, connected us with Mac. So for that, we are eternally grateful. So please welcome to the show my friend and one of Mac's angels, Diane Dewberry.
Welcome, Diane. Happy to talk to you today.
Thank you for letting me be here. I love the thing about you doing hospice because I think it's such a wonderful thing to be able to do. And I'm so happy you do that. And when you start doing it, please let me know because there's plenty of flower essences that can really help for hospice. I'd be happy to help you with that. So
we'll connect on that level for sure, Diane. I think that that's going to be a great addition to my journey.
I'd like to interject here, Diane. I have a confession to make. I may be during this chat like the average pet owner that really hasn't heard of the term flower essences. And when Cathy brought it up, I'm like, sure, because I knew you guys were connected and I trusted Cathy and and I thought this is great. And she's like, well, Rescue Remedy is a flower essence, as mentioned earlier. And I'm like, well, I certainly know Rescue Remedy. I think I was first introduced to that, gosh, Cathy, almost 20 years ago with Prince.
Right.
Yeah. So a Doberman that was down and he was anxious and I was helping in his care at the facility that Cathy worked at the time. And that was my first exposure. So I'm thrilled to learn more from you today, Diane. I'm very excited to get into this.
Most people, they do know Rescue Remedy, and you can get it so many different places. And it's a good thing to always have on hand is to have that remedy because it really helps for so many different things. And that's first like a go-to to have. It's always wonderful to have in your cabinet. And then there's what I find about people don't look at Rescue Remedy as flower essences. And so flower essences is sort of like a modality that was started off in the 30s from Dr. Bach, but was really, he brought that forward. So more people use it now because he was a doctor, but it's been really used for centuries by different indigenous countries and how they use it in separate different ways. But I found flower essences many, many years ago, like maybe 30 years ago, just unexpectedly, and didn't even really know too much about them. But I brought them in my grooming shop. 4 computers were out and you really couldn't do a lot of research. And I found this one particular company called Pet Essences. And I said, oh, I'm going to bring it in. It sounds fascinating because I was really into that esoteric and just vibrational energy medicine. So I brought them in and didn't really know anything about them. But the beauty about her essences is that she blends them because you can take all these different flowers and blend them depending on what kind of behaviors are presenting itself. So she has one that says anxiety and fear, and it does exactly what that. It helps with anxiety and fear. So you have to always look at that behavior. But I started using them on my animals, and I was really just amazed at the change in them. But I still didn't understand them until I used to go to this wonderful holistic vet up in North Shore. And she was really into flower essences. And she had been, she was a certified practitioner. And she said, if you really want to know about flower essences, then you should take flower essence therapy for yourself. And I went, okay. And 30 years ago, I was, always taking classes and doing all sorts of things. And so I went to her teacher, David Dalton, with Delta Gardens. And to this day, I still take classes. He's my mentor. And I started taking flower essence therapy and was absolutely blown away by how it affected my emotional body and my life. I was absolutely amazed. And I said, wow, if this can do this for me, it's so wonderful what it can do for animals and all their different behaviors, because we live so close together. Animals, our dogs and cats live with humans. So we really need to put that together. And it was just wonderful. I was so thrilled about it. So I started taking his flower essence practitioner course, and I took it twice.
It was just that good, right? It was so good.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And I said, okay, I think I'm going to take it again a few years later, because, you get busy, you do this, you do that, and you don't put it all together. And so then I said, oh, I just, it kept coming back, and I could see how wonderfully it worked, because it's so non-toxic. You could use it with anything. They're inexpensive. You can get them in many different places. And it's just such a great modality to use. I was just absolutely fascinated by this, and it's been one of my main modalities that I really want to continue to work with.
So Diane, you keep referring to the term flower essences, and I guess I don't really understand what that means. I mean, are they like taking a flower like lavender or something and like squeezing the juice out of it and creating an essence? Is it something they ingest? Is it something they smell? I would love for you to elaborate on that, because I'm still in the dark.
So flower essences are made, to me, they're like plant spirit medicine, but in a liquid form. So you take the flowers when they're bloomed, and you put them in water, like in a bowl. And I always use a glass bowl. And I always use natural water. And you put it in the sunlight anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. Some people even use less. So it takes in the vibrational imprint of that flower. Every flower has an imprint. So I always use the example of like snapdragon. You know how snapdragon has that little funny little snappy like? So that is good for dogs that have a lot of tension in their jaws and that are biters. So that sort of gives a little bit of an explanation. So you're really taking on that vibrational remedy and putting it in, and you put it in a bottle with the water, and then I put a preservative in. I use brandy, and then you can take out of maybe like a half a gallon of this. That will last me years, because you use very little of it, and you just taking the mother bottle and you just make your dosage bottles out, and they last a long time as long as you use a preservative and keep them, you don't keep them in heat or out in the sunlight after you do that. And it really is a wonderful form of healing.
How do you determine which flowers you're going to blend? So let's say, let's go back to Digger, for instance. We had talked about him being afraid of crying children. What did you put together? What did you mix together to make that combination? It was almost like, I want to say it was a custom sort of thing for his behavior.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So every animal, I always look at what's being presented. So when you have, you find out what the behaviors are. That's the observation or intuitive work. And then you can see what's really bothering that animal on an emotional level. With a few companies that I really like. And the first thing that I do is I look, is that animal grounded? Do we need to ground that animal? And so I use a lot of trees. And then I also look at the chakra system, and see what kind of chakra essence can I use for that animal. And then I always look at something to calm the animal down and a release. So I always use marshmallow, every single animal that I do, because it really does put it's like soft pillows around the dog. That's what it feels like, because you're really supporting that emotional body as they're releasing trauma. And sometimes I use milk thistle, sometimes I use other things. It really depends. So I really work sort of like from the ground up, depending on the worst behaviors that are presenting itself, because you want to get to that root cause. And with animals, it's a lot easier because they don't have as much baggage as we do. They don't have as many layers. So sometimes it can be very transformative, as you saw, and other times it depends on how much trauma the dog has had. So that's how I make a custom blend, is I always look to see how sensitive that animal is, how stressed that animal is, how much trauma. And it's easy to sort of like place the behavior with the essences. And that's where the beauty of it is. It's really beautiful to see, like in your case with Digger, he was really transformed very quickly. So it's always nice to observe and to see which ones are the correct ones to use.
I'm struck, Diane, by how seemingly literal it is. So you're like, if the dog needs grounded, I'm going to go to trees. And you think about trees being rooted deeply into the earth. And, snapdragon for a dog that's snappy. And, the marshmallows as a pillow of comfort.
It's
I don't even know
literal.
what the word is. Surprising, so interesting, etc. Yeah.
I think it's so easy for people to really look at flower essences, and they're so inexpensive. And I'll mention a few companies that really do very well with animals. And if you get the wrong one, it doesn't matter. It's totally negated. It's not going to do anything at all. And I really like using them with cats too, because cats are so energetic and they're very complicated. So those it's easy. It's wonderful for cats too. So it's a really inexpensive modality for people to start looking into, because a lot of people don't know about flower essences at all. And I really think it's a wonderful vibrational healing tool to help animals with their behaviors sort of get past that trauma. And it's really beautiful in releasing trauma, because that when they do get the trauma, it's just like people, it gets into their cells. You really need to sort of move that. And if the animal is too sensitive and has a lot going on, you want to do it slowly, very slowly, and that can be done. So it's just, there's just so many essences that help so many situations with animals.
It's interesting to me that you say that the cats are more complicated, and I think you're right. I think that there's something going on with them that makes them, I don't know, either maybe perhaps they're more connected to things that are happening in the universe. I'm not sure. But
Yes.
I think people don't always think about their cat's emotional life or their emotional trauma. I'm not sure why that is. I think hardcore cat people probably do, but maybe you don't think about that. But that happens to cats too. And interestingly enough, it actually happens to birds. And Diane has treated a few of our patients with flower essences with birds, because they can also hold a lot of emotional trauma and have a lot of behaviors that are maybe naughty or destructive, that are outside their normal sort of natural, like shredding and stuff like that. So we've used them with birds too, and pretty successfully. So I guess I wanted to say is that any of our pets could have or hold emotional trauma.
Yes. And you find it so interesting. You could use it on any animal. Like I have this big bay window in my house, and always in the spring I hear a thud, and birds are always going into it, no matter what I do to try to deter that. Sometimes the little ones don't make it, but the bigger ones always do, and they're always in a place of shock. So I just grab, it's like Rescue Remedy, but it's another company that I use called Emergency. And I just put it in my hands and I rub it on the bird, and it really does help. You see them sort of come out of it, and then they just fly away. And I have a parrot who's had a couple of accidents, and this past accident that she had, very traumatic. And one day I could hear my little lovebird making all this noise, and I went, wow, she never makes that noise. So I went into my office where I keep the bird, and Ollie was actually I thought she was having a seizure, but I truly believe she was having a panic attack. So I sprayed her with this emergency remedy. I put it in the spray bottle after I put her in a towel so she could relax, so she wouldn't fall off her perch. And I sprayed her with it, and she immediately came out of it. It was really wonderful to see.
So am I hearing, Diane, that, again, when earlier I was confused about, how it's delivered, and you talked about how it's made. So obviously it's a liquid, but it can be topical and or orally ingested. What is the most common method of delivery?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. I like it directly in the mouth with dogs, but sometimes you just can't do that. They're going to go, oh, you're not putting that in my mouth, because it does have a little bit of brandy. But a lot of times dogs, I hear clients say, oh, it came right up, opened his mouth, and I could just put it in. He really wanted it. So some animals just intuitively know they need it. And other times you can put it like on the inside of the ears, or you can put it on a soft cookie that's going to be absorbed through it. So there's many different ways. You can always keep it in their water. But I like to, if you can, I always like it directly in the animal's mouth. With cats, forget it. That's not going to happen.
And like you said, with birds, then you rubbed it on, or
I did a spray. And my other one, she doesn't like sprays, so I just put it in her. She's got like a little bowl where she takes baths. So I'll put it in there because she takes a bath every morning. So I think you have to know every animal and which way they're going to be able to take it in. But there's always a way. There's always a way to put it in there. With cats, I put it either on my hands and rub it in, or I'll put it on their coat and then pat it so it doesn't fall off. And when you seem to put it on a cat, they're going to lick it right off because you put.
Good point.
What do you think is the most significant, or maybe the most emotional trauma you see from pets? Is it, I don't know, being adopted? Is it some type of physical trauma, like being hit by a car? Like, what's the most common thing that we see that you're treating?
Trauma is definitely the biggest one. And now that so many dogs are coming up from down south, I find the biggest part of that is a couple of different reasons. One of them is the travel up in these, however they're traveled into, because they're young puppies, they have to be contained, and it's very scary for them. A lot of them, some of them are just fine, but a lot of them that have had that trauma before, it's very scary for them. They don't know where they're going. There's a lot of noise. It's bumpy. It's sometimes dark. They just, it's very scary for them.
Close proximity with other animals that they don't know. And
oh, sure.
That has to be scary.
Yes. And so all these different smells, you're leaving one area where these animals are so used to certain smells, and then you're coming to another part of the country where it smells totally different to them. And there's just so much fear involved from all the other animals that it's sort of like gets this collective of energy, and they all, feel the same thing. So that's something I find is very prominent in animals, because they don't want to go in a car, or they have a huge abandonment issues. And another thing is they don't have a lot of, well, I'm going to say this on the intuitive part that I do, a lot of which they get it through I'm just going to say the womb from their mother usually, or their father, it could be, is a lot of terror and fear, because those animals had a lot of trauma, and a lot of, maybe they didn't want to have a litter, or they went in a spot where it was very difficult for them, or they had a lot of birth trauma. And so a lot of this birth trauma that people have no idea that they've had comes along with it. So it just accumulates, they're born with birth trauma. Their mother had fear, and so it just comes through the womb, and it creates sort of like this snowstorm, and it just continues as you keep adding to these things. And even though people are always wonderful and good, and they're doing their best that they can, that's a lot what I see.
Just to get hardwired in there, is that?
Yes.
Hardwired. Yeah.
Well, and again, plain devil's advocate here, ladies. I mean, you have experience with this modality, decades in your case, Diane. So just to clarify, it seems as though flower essences are used for psycho-emotional well-being. It's not a physical modality, like you wouldn't use it to, I don't know, fix cancer or a orthopedic issue or what have you. It's the quote emotional trauma that may surround that. How did they get that issue? But it's not going to. Am I making making sense? It seems behavioral and okay.
It's that emotional balance that you're always looking at. So dogs, you're always looking for that balance and harmony, because it's not animals are naturally born to feel, the earth, that, the connection to nature. And of course, humans, we bring them in, of course, they live with us. And a lot of times they're not able to get out, and a lot of times they're isolated. So they're not able to be with a lot of dogs. And so a lot of them don't even know how to be a dog, because a lot of people isolate them. So, and there are ways to do that. So, you can bring them back to nature. And then when they have the emotional balance, they can go anywhere. It's just finding that behavior and looking at that. And a lot of people that live with them, I think it's just another form of a little bit of a learning curve, but it's very easy with flower essences, like the Bach essences. They have a wonderful book that's called Bach Flower Remedies for Animals. And it's wonderful. It just gives you all this information. It's a very inexpensive book. And again, it tells you exactly what to use and to look for. And, you can play with it. You're not gonna hurt your animal by using these. So it's really kind of a fun way to do a little, if you notice that your dog has some behavior issues that you'd like to help them with.
Cathy, do you remember when we talked to Dr. Terry Bright, a behaviorist? Yeah. She was very clear in saying, a dog is a dog. And yeah. I'm going to paraphrase here, but almost like we've done a disservice bringing them into our homes and treating them like children in a certain way. And so this all makes sense when you think about, their roots and how quickly dogs in particular have evolved to be our companions. And we don't always think about the stress that we may be imparting to them. We're a little bit selfish in that, we want them to cuddle and we want them to sleep in our bed. And that's unnatural for a lot of dogs.
I would say that Mac is a pretty emotionally confident dude. He's pretty confident with himself, but the happiest he is when we take him hiking. That's the happiest we see him in. And he's happy in a lot of situations, but I feel like his emotional well-being, the most happy he feels or the most joy he feels is us taking him on a woods walk. And we just came back from New Hampshire on a vacation, which we centered the whole vacation around Mac, basically, which is pretty much our lives, but we picked trails and went hiking every day on those trails. And I just could feel that he felt that, he could feel his feet on the ground. He was walking over rocks and climbing over, little streams. And I could just feel that, he could feel it through his feet, feel it through his body. And I think that's his most happiest. Hey, Chris, I'd like to take a little break right now, if you don't mind, and talk a little bit about our sponsor, MedcoVet. And they have a home laser therapy device called the MedcoVet Luma that is prescribed by your veterinarian or your rehab clinician, and the treatments are carried out at home by the owner.
Some of you folks out there may be familiar with laser therapy, therapeutic laser, cold laser, photobiomodulation. That's what this is. And it's really taken off in veterinary medicine to expedite healing, decrease inflammation, and add comfort for our pets.
It's an excellent tool. Clinicians who are out there, veterinarians who are out there, this is an excellent way to supplement your therapy treatments. And it's so easy to use. Veterinarians or clinicians, you sign your patients up, you monitor their treatments via the MedcoVet app. You set the dosage, you set the time, and you pick the areas of treatment, and the owners carry this out at home. They can communicate with you via the MedcoVet app. They can send pictures, updates, and video. It really is a simple and easy process.
I know a phrase that I often hear from the company is that it actually extends veterinary medicine into the home. And what's so important about this particular home device is that it is 100% eye safe and also meets the guidelines of the World Association of Laser Therapy, or WALT. And WALT came out with guidelines for both the human side and the veterinary side, the animal side, of using light therapy and developing protocols and what specifications the devices should have in order to create this therapeutic effect. And the MedcoVet Luma meets all of those guidelines. To find out more information about the MedcoVet Luma, please visit medcovet.com. That's medcovet.com. They are a wonderful sponsor of the Petability podcast, and we are so happy to partner with them. So Diane, you've alluded that flower essences are completely safe, that even if you don't have exactly the right one, it's not going to cause any problems. Can flower essences be used preventatively to further enhance our pets' well-being? And then in that case, if we're not seeing anything in particular, how would we know what to choose?
I don't really use them if I find a really well-balanced dog, because if they have the right environment and they're socialized well and the behavior is great and they're very happy, I don't see the need to do that. I mean, you certainly can do that. And there's some essences that you can use to always keep them happy or always keep them grounded.
Diane, the loaded question. So how do we know if the flower essence that we are using is working or providing the maximum benefit that it potentially could?
So obviously you're using this to either change your behavior or look for different signs that, the nervousness, anxiousness, and sometimes it's subtle, but sometimes it's pretty much, it can be right away. So you'll always see a behavior change. You'll always see a body change. You will definitely be able to notice that. Like the first time I used essences on a dog that I had long, long time ago, she was very primitive and she was just a wild woman. But she had trauma that I wasn't aware of. And so, and I went to my teacher, David Dalton, and on one of the flowers that was in the blend that he had was milk thistle, which I use a lot for release of trauma. And he said, well, she'll either sleep a lot or go to the bathroom a lot. And I wanted the sleep a lot, which she did. And this was a dog that didn't sleep much. She was up and ready to go. And I was like, and she was out. And it was so interesting to see her after she woke up. It was you could just see it in her eyes, her behavior. There was a softness, and it continued to be that way. She was still herself, but the anxiousness of certain things that triggered her weren't there. And I had her on essences a few months. And then after that, I really didn't need it. The trauma had passed or moved through her body. And it was worked out. She worked it out because she was a dog that had to be outside all the time. And it was really good for her. She'd just hang out in the yard for hours. And being down, and she'd always sit underneath trees. And that was so helpful for her. But people they'll even notice it with their cats. It's just, even with their eyes, the body, there's just a softness. There's always a change. Always could be subtle, but there's always a change.
That's what we noticed with Digger. There was just this softness about him after that. And even the fact that he wandered into a little group of children to just sit and let them pat him was amazing. But also it probably felt really good for him too. This is okay. This is safe. I feel confident. I feel balanced, and I'm going to let these children, pet me. And there was a softness to it. And honestly, I think he enjoyed it. At that time, he enjoyed it.
You kind of touched on my follow-up because you said she didn't need it anymore. And that was going to be my question. Once you discover, what works for a particular pet, do they need to remain on the flower essence for their entire life? I'm sure some may, but others, as you said, can kind of work through this emotional trauma and be better and not need it. Is that true?
Yes. And so there are some dogs that have a lot of trauma, and those in particular, I will ask to, let's do a 3-month or let's do a 4-month. And very rarely is it longer than that, if they've just been traumatized really bad. But I think animals just innately, if they get the right tools, they know how to rebalance. It's part of their nature. And if we also let them be a dog, it's so important. They need to be outside. So many animals live with people and they're so young, they get imprinted to human behaviors. And so they don't know how to be a dog. But when you give them the right tools, it's like an awakening for them to go, wow, I'm a dog. I want to be outside. I want to be with other dogs, or I just want to feel the ground underneath my feet for a long period of time. And they're more, again, like Cathy said, confident. They're able to go out. A lot of these dogs don't have confidence. It's because they just don't have it. They're fearful.
Diane, what about grief in animals? I mean, I think people have asked me on many occasions, actually, it's a very common question I get about their pets mourning the loss of someone, either their owner or their other housemate, the other dog or the other cat. And it's my belief, I do think that these animals experience what I'm going to call either grief or a mourning period. Are flower essences helpful for that stage for pets who've lost?
Yes, because grief is huge. If they're not watching for the behaviors or really connected to their animals as certain, as we are, some people just aren't. The grief is huge in dogs, and there's so many flower essences that really help with that. Like I use like Lily of the Valley. There's so many different ones, and a lot of times I'll use borage just to help animals for depression. And it's like it's a glad, happy herb, so it brings so many things around to them. So it's a huge issue with animals. Grief is a big one. Whether they lose a human, or they lose a sibling, or just another friend that they live with. So it's really huge.
And so, Diane, because of how safe it is to use flower essence, I can use it right in combination with all my other modalities in rehab, right? I can use them with laser therapy or any other type of chiropractic, acupuncture. Do they complement each other?
They do. And so they really do complement each other. And in fact, sometimes they enhance. A lot of people will use flower essences on acupuncture points because it really enhances that activity or the moving of the energy. So a lot of times that helps. Or massage. It's great for massage. You can put it on, again, their points or your hands and just work into that animal's body. And it really does help it's another form of getting into that. So into the body, but it's great for all of those modalities that are hands-on and are very energetic in a physical way or an energetic way like acupuncture.
Right. And we're moving stuff when we're doing tissue work. We're moving stuff around too. So yeah, that's exciting. I might just add that into my therapy plans.
Be happy to help you. It's just amazing. It really is. And the beauty of it is that you get it in your system too. So a lot of these times when I give flower essences to their pet, I also give them to the pet parent because these animals many times will have the same issue that the pet parent has, sometimes behavior and physical.
It's crazy. Sometimes I have clients who actually even have the same disease process as their pet has the same disease process as them. And I'm like, wow, that can't be a coincidence. That can't be
no, it's not. It happens all the time. We talk to people all the time and I'll go, so you'll be talking to people and they'll be telling you about their dog's stomach issue. Again, digestion is one of the huge ones. And when you're talking about them and they'll all of a sudden, I've got that same thing. And so it's just... And so we're not surprised.
But that's how bonded we are to them, We share everything, our energy, everything,
Yes.
I just kind of want to piggyback on that and say too, then there's no contraindication with more conventional Western medicine sorts of things either. Because Cathy mentioned some of the holistic treatments, that we use or interact with in terms of rehab, but specific medications and, vaccines and things that are very rooted in Western medicine. There's no contraindication there.
None. And that's the beauty of this, because it is so non-toxic that you can use it literally with anything. It is the safest modality to use because, again, it doesn't interfere with anything. You can even use it with homeopathy. It's just so safe.
And even maybe a pregnant mother, sure. She can pass that on, right? That's safe for them as well.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Yeah. And in fact, sometimes
get that trauma before they come out.
Right. We want to work on that. Yeah. So there's so many different ways to use those essences. Yeah. And that's what I like about the flower essences is that, again, you can use it on any animal and on any behavior and on any physical, anything with anything. It's just so simple to use.
You say that it's simple, but that was going to be my next question, because I'm like, how would we know? Do we have to go to somebody who's an expert to learn, which essence to choose? How do you know which brands are good or not? How do you dose it? Can one overdose or underdose?
With flower essences, it's really a vibrational remedy. So there's not like, you have to be careful for giving a Chihuahua, a 5-pound Chihuahua, to a 150-pound dog, or even a horse for that matter. So like the doses, I dose the same as for a 5-pound dog as I would for a 150-pound dog. There's no difference at all.
And the dose actually, Chris, is pretty much in drops. It's really,
Yes.
It's not I mean, you might be thinking of how you give your dog medication and they give you a big syringe. It's it's just a few drops typically, right, Diane?
Yes, so I would, most of the time, I'll either say 3 drops 3 times a day or 5 drops 3 times a day, depending on the animal and depending on what I'm shown. So, and that's it. And you're just using one little, these little drops. And I usually give a bottle for a month. And so that's usually like a 1-ounce bottle. And that will last somebody sometimes over a month. But that's all you need to use. And sometimes if people are really even nervous about giving it in their mouth or in a cookie, or there's no way the dog's going to take it, you just put it in your hands and you start at the top of the head and you work all the way down to that body, because that's really like, number one, you're touching the body, there's that energy field that's moving, and so it's getting into that body, it's getting into that vibrational field, and helping that dog. Yeah, so there's way, even cats, again, that's a great way for cats, but any animal you can do that too.
So conversely, as opposed to overdosing, can an animal acclimate to it so that it's no longer effective and you need to switch things up?
Yeah, I like to switch things up. So when, because let's say you get to one root cause and it's released, you don't need to work on that anymore. I always switch up essences every month. I might keep a few flowers in there because I see how well the dog is doing on certain things, but I'll remove and replace other things that I want to work on, or the pet parent is saying, well, this is what's presenting itself with the animal, or I'll have them come in and they just, we just talk about a lot of things. And once people start using the essences and they're using it, there's just this awareness and this a connection that they really get like, oh boy, I want to keep doing this. And they also use them for themselves too. A lady that came in here, I never suggested them for the cats because she never asked me, but she was very stressed and she'd been a longtime client. And I said, you know what, just take this bottle. It was called Calm. And I said, just take like 5 drops 3 times a day. Well, she did. And so every time she comes back to shop for her cat, she gets a bottle. She goes, where's that calming bottle? I need it. And so
I need that. Yeah, I get it. I think after Digger passed, that you had recommended something for me. I believe it was called Grief Relief, because I was having a hard time with his passing. Yeah. It just allowed me to, I was crying at work and stuff like that. But after Grief Relief, it allowed me to get them out in my grief out in little short, manageable doses. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I was able to, over time, just absorb or feel the grief, but in not so dramatic ways, maybe. And it really helped me through a very difficult time after he passed. And I used that for probably, I want to say at least a month, maybe 2 months. But it was very effective. And I stopped crying at work. So that was good.
Right. And, I have to say, I'm glad you brought up grief, because grief is I feel one of the biggest emotions for humans when they lose a pet, and also for the pet too. But the human really has a hard time. And a lot of times they don't want to say anything, but many, of course, they can hear because we have that kind of environment. And grief is a huge emotion for people. It's just a feeling that you really want to help these people along the way, because it's so important. Grief is really important.
It is. And I believe there's a term for it, and I think it's called disenfranchised grief, where society doesn't recognize that particular grief as being as intense as it is. And people are often embarrassed, you're right, to discuss the fact that they have grief over their pet. But some people are closer to their pets than they are to any other human on the planet. A lot of people. I'm glad we brought that up too. I think grief is a big one for people and for pets.
Yeah, it really is. And I think I'm glad now they have like a lot of grief emotional support. A lot of animal communicators have those like groups online, because you need support sometimes on a continual basis. And it's very helpful for people. And then you have people that get together that have the same feelings or emotions that they do, because they want to work on that grief. And so when you're with like-minded people, you're able to really release that and feel a little bit better. And just sometimes just to talk about it, your life with that animal and what it meant to you is really important.
Cathy, don't you think that we should introduce flower essences to our friend Sam Hankey? Because she is an extraordinary massage therapist that we both work closely with, but also a Reiki master. And I think that this would be a great augmentation to her practice.
Right. She does cranial sacral work and she is also an intuitive. So she treats intuitively.
Yep.
And Mac has seen her on a few occasions. And Mac can be a little bit of a wild child when it comes to accepting help. Does that make sense? Like he's kind of like a manly dude. He wants to do it on his own. But Sam has really, she's really worked hard at building a relationship with him. But yes, I think that would be a wonderful combination.
Yes.
The tissue work and how she works intuitively. Yeah.
And we've interviewed her as well. So if you like this podcast, check that one out. Yeah. So as we're, kind of closing things, I want to get back to the question I had before with, do we need to find someone like you, Diane, to help us along this journey? Or can people shop online like we're all doing these days and just read descriptions and say, yes, I think this may help my pet? Again, I know with other holistic types of treatments, because these types of things aren't FDA regulated. And so, quality of products can be all over the place. Are there certain brands, as somebody who studied this for decades, that you would recommend? How does our listener who may not be in touch with somebody such as yourself go about finding flower essences?
So I would, and again, it's so easy for people to be able to do this. It's one of the companies is the Bach. Everybody knows the Bach flowers. And so they have an online thing and they teach a lot about animals. Like they have it in England. You can either go there or they have online. You can learn about these flower essences, or sometimes you can just go on the Bach Flower Remedies and they'll have lots of information that will help you just learn a little bit what you need to know. You don't need to know a huge amount. I mean, I do this for certain work for many different reasons, but for people, layman's terms, there's so much information out there. The Bach flower essences, the FES, the flower essence studies, they're out in California. They're huge into that. You can just put FES flower essences. They're a huge company. They were one of the first, and they're wonderful. They have a lot of things on animals. And then also the Alaskan essences. One of the women that heads that up, she's a communicator, and they have wonderful essences for people and pets. They're just a wealth of knowledge. So, and Delta Gardens has a lot out there too. So there's so many. Oh, and there's one in particular that I think everybody will like, and her name is Molly Sheehan, and she's from Green Hope Farm in New Hampshire, and she has a whole site just for animals.
And I think, Diane, if I'm correct, people can actually go to your website, right, at
the
Healthy Animal Healing Center, and there's a guide
yes
that you can download.
Yes. Yep. They can certainly do that.
We'll put that in our show notes.
One more question. You alluded that FES has a lot of studies and things. And Cathy, I think you mentioned to me there was a study done that talked about the effectiveness of lavender.
Deborah Wells did a study on the effects of lavender with dogs that have travel-induced anxiety, and it was favorable.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, I know I had some essential oils and things in my practice at Flow Dog, and it was lavender. And I would say to, even put it on like a kerchief and have the dog wear it around its neck or whatever. And, again, it's just one of those subtle multimodal approaches to helping, pets with potential anxiety and so forth. Diane, I'm just curious if there is not a brand or a blend, but we were just talking about lavender. Would you say that there is one a singular flower essence that you think is the most commonly used, either in your practice or, as you mentioned, these other folks?
A couple that I use a lot is the linden tree, because I personally use it myself because it's good for anxiety. and worry, and it's very angelic in its being. And like I can just sit under, luckily I have a linden tree in my big yard, didn't know it for 17 years, just the beautiful tree. And when you sit underneath that, and the dogs sit underneath that all the time, it's like you're just calm and you're happy. It's like things release. It's just the most wonderful essence. Another one that I use, a lot of people will use, is Star of Bethlehem. And that's good for a shock, trauma, and it really is helpful for a lot of dogs. And again, I like so many different trees, but there's a few that people can always get, like again, Star of Bethlehem, one of the Bach remedies, you can just get that. And again, I use borage a lot for animals because it just, again, that's not something they can get it where I learned from. And it just really, makes depressed dogs happy, as people too. So, but I think some of the biggest ones are the Star of Bethlehem. And now there's another one that I think is really great. And that's chamomile is really good for dogs because it has this, it's good for upset stomach. And a lot of anxiety dogs have that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And there's one more I'm going to tell you about because you mentioned training in the notes that you sent me. Mm-hmm. So I always recommend celandine because celandine opens up the communication between the animal and the pet parent. So it's people want to train more, want to do more things with their dogs. It creates more of a connection intuitively so they can both open up to each other and they can understand what's going on. And if you look at it, it looks like it's got little antennas up there. It's really interesting. It's a beautiful little flower.
Again, the literal translation of so many things.
Yeah.
All right, Diane, this has been extremely fascinating. I've learned a ton. I have a much greater understanding of what flower essences are, how they work, and how they can help so many of our pets of all species. So thank you very much. As we close, can you please tell once again our audience where they can find you if they want information or counseling on flower essences? And also, do you have any last thoughts or pearls of information that you want to share with our audience?
Well, they can reach us at healthyanimalhealing.com, and there's some flower essence ebook there for them, but you can reach out to us, any of us, anytime, and we'd be happy to help you with anything. I just really think that I'm really trying to bring forth this wonderful modality, this vibrational modality for people that is so easy to use and so inexpensive to use. But just on general terms, it's a wonderful place to start helping your animal.
Get that, start from a place of balance.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
I'm so happy that we had a chance to chat today, and we'll make sure all those things get in our show notes. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diane.
And Diane, please consider this fair warning, but I think I'm going to bring my Baxter down to see you very soon. He has never been balanced. He has been a worrywart from the time we got him. And I think this could be just the trick that he needs to kind of smooth him out a little bit.
I would love to meet him, and I'd love to meet you. Happy to help. I just find it fascinating, and I would love to. Please come down.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show.
Follow us on social media at PetAbility Podcast.
And please check out our affiliates and sponsors.
Simply go to the show notes for information and links.
Thank you, and tune in next time.